Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. Welcome to another edition of the Level Up Hour here on OpenShift TV. I am Chris Short, host with the most and executive producer of OpenShift TV. I feel like I have something that's playing that shouldn't be. I don't know, a phone went off or something. That was weird. Anyways, I'm joined by the one and only, the illustrious Langdon White. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, apparently I was a little fuzzy, so I decided to make myself a little sharper.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, sometimes when I move around too much because I tend to talk very animatedly, the camera gets a little unhappy with me. Um,
Ah,
but I am doing okay. We always need more coffee, as we talk about a lot on the show, or we don't talk about coffee so much as we talk about
we
needing
just the
coffee.
need for it, yeah.
Yeah. However, we do have a show about coffee, right? Or is it really just a coffee clatch kind of
It's the open shift. No, it's what is it
the
called?
OpenShift
Next,
coffee hour? I think
it's
it's
every
something like
other
that.
week. Yeah, it's like the open shift coffee break or coffee hour or something like that. Open shift coffee break run by the one and only Natalie Vento and our counterpart Jafar Charabi. So yeah, it's a great show. If you're EU based, check it out. It's on
Well, it's still a
at
great show, even if you're not. It's just
right.
whether
Like if you want to
whether
get
you
up
want to
at
commit to.
if you want to get up at 4 a.m. Eastern and watch it, or 1 a.m. Pacific, you're more than welcome to, and nothing's going to stop you from doing that. But it is
Maybe
on
some people can
at
watch before they go to bed in
8.
Pacific,
Yeah, maybe.
right? Right.
Yeah,
All
it's a
right.
good show,
So
but check it out for real. So yeah.
I'm going to share my, as always, awesome slides. I am promised we're getting some new collateral so that
Assets, whatever. Yeah.
assets, yeah. Ooh, that was disappointing. So maybe they'll get snazzier. I wouldn't hold my breath. I'm not. But they might at least look different. So that'll be fun and exciting for you. So this is a level up hour where we talk about kind of why containers are cool, and why you might want to get using containers yourself as kind of like a RHEL admin, or a system administrator who hasn't got a
Mm-hmm.
lot of experience with containers. We also cover some development activities as well. So obviously if you're a developer, this might be relevant as well. But then with the goal of kind of expecting that as you kind of get deeper and deeper into containers, you discover that the need for orchestration is really, really important. And so you tend to start to look for ways to do orchestration. So we're going to talk about one of those today with Docker Compose and using Podman. And we may be doing the Docker Compose as a group here today, and we'll see how that goes. I do know that I got it all running in Podman, so at least we know that variable is taken care of. But the rest of it, Um, so I did want to mention a couple of the upcoming things. So next episode, we are going to be doing a UBI deep dive. So a lot of people are really interested in how exactly UBI is put together.
Mm-hmm.
So we've invited Scott McCarty to come on the show, and I scheduled it months ago, so I need to confirm that he's going to be able to make it. But in theory, we should be talking to him next week about the UBI and how that works, and maybe the future of UBI, like as in what do we have planned for it coming up. And then the week after that, yes, Father Linux, JP Dade on the Twitters. And then the week after that, we're actually going to do a big special show with our CTO at Red Hat, who I just totally blanked on his name. Chris Wright, also known
CTO. Sorry, Chris Wright. Yes.
yeah, also known as C-Dubs on the interwebs,
Mm-hmm.
and or Colonel C-Dub, I think is his Twitter handle. Because he was a kernel guy for a long time, and also primarily in the kind of networking space. And then our other guest with Chris is, God, I cannot talk this morning. Kelsey Hightower of
Yes.
currently of Google, but well known in the Kubernetes community. And they did a show together that is going to be appearing on one of our channels in a few weeks' time, basically releasing like at exactly the same time as this show. But it's a really, really short, cut down, quick grab bag of content around Kubernetes.
Mm-hmm.
and both of them expressed an interest in kind of expanding about that concept. So we're inviting them both to the show to talk about that, and also to talk about upcoming summit, which will be the week after next. So next week is UBI. Week after that is Chris Wright and Kelsey Hightower.
Yeah.
Week after that is Summit. Week after that is Kubecon EU. So yeah, it's a busy few weeks.
It is a busy few weeks here at Red Hat. Yes.
Right. So they're going to talk a little bit. Hopefully, we're going to ask them a little bit about what they're looking forward to at Summit and KubeCon, maybe in reference to their backstory. So watch, and this kind of is a nice segue into watch us on Twitter, watch the OpenShift handle as well, because we'll be kind of sending out the announcements to kind of say, hey, we're doing the show, and this is what it's going to be, to get a little bit more on the abstract. But what I really want to talk about around Kubernetes is also around kind of like, what's the future of it? Like, what's the, what's the kind of end game? Is it just container orchestration, or is it other stuff as well?
Yeah.
So talk to us on our Discord. I also want to do another plug. We haven't gotten a whole lot of response, so we are sad and disappointed. But if you share what you've learned, anything that you've learned on the show on various social media, and then post about it on our Discord, just so that we can track it without having to follow the entire internet. We're raffling off a few tickets for KubeCon EU. And if you haven't gotten a ticket yet and you are interested in going, that's a great way to go. So hopefully you can find something that you learned about, and feel free to just post about the show anyway, but that this is a particular promotion. We are also offering tickets to Summit, so everyone who listens to the show gets a free ticket to Summit. So does everyone else, but because the entire show is free. But yeah, so check it out, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Let's see. I have no recollection as to what the next slide is, because it's one of those mornings. Oh yeah,
it's points, isn't it?
No, that's the one after. That's what I always think the next one's going to be points, but it's actually this one, which is not very informative. But today's episode is about Podman v3, potentially Docker Compose and the Cool Store. And then the show notes from last time. I realized late last night, early this morning, that I had forgotten completely. Like, I thought they were done, and it turns out when I went to look, they were not.
So there's these apps called to-do lists.
I know. In fact, it's on the to-do list, and it's even marked as not done. I don't know why I had it stuck in my head. It's this kind of never-ending problem of if I can remember what episode we are on,
right,
then I remember what the last one was and whether I did it. And so I was totally thinking we were on episode 29, which means I did do the episode 28 show notes. So that's the challenge. So I will take care of that, and we will have the show notes for next time. One other quick thing I had for an idea this morning is we know pretty closely, right? We know a community organization that runs an OpenShift instance, aka Fedora. And I'm not sure if I need to find this out. I can't remember if Fedora runs one and the CentOS community runs a separate one, or if they run one together. So that's the first piece of data. Second piece of data is we also run one internally for our both for experimentation. We run one for experimentation, but we also run one that actually runs some of our applications. So like a production instance, which is always hard when it's your own software, right? And then, we obviously have a large number of customers. And I was wondering, and think about this during the show, obviously we have the time lag, so it's hard to ask and get answers back immediately. But what I was thinking is, would it be cool? I think it might be cool to do like a 3-episode series where we interview the community group hosting OpenShift, and then do another episode, which is interviewing the Red Hat internal people hosting OpenShift. And then the last one being, we find a customer who's hosting OpenShift who's willing to come on the show, and kind of talk to all 3 of them about what it means to host OpenShift, and is there differences in those different environments. So I thought that sounded like fun. I don't know, what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, sounds good.
Like blindsiding you.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. You're never going to get a no from me unless you're like calling a show a really terrible name or something.
Which I might have done in the past.
Yes.
Like
So
the
someone,
underneath.
I don't know how to say your name. I'm very sorry, but someone on YouTube asked, "How do we get the free ticket to Kubecon?" Can you clarify on that for a
Oh,
second?
sure.
You did kind of speed through it.
Yeah. So, well, first, if written is better, check out my Twitter handle. I have a whole series of tweets about how to do it. But the short and the short version is post somewhere on social media about something that you learned on the Level Up Hour, then put a link to that posting, and this is so that we don't have to limit you to what kind of social media you like to use, on our Discord, just to say, hey, I posted, and then we're gonna raffle off, and so what that means is we're gonna give away at random some tickets based on the number, or based on the set of people who posted on social media. Excuse me. Hopefully that made more sense.
Yes.
And feel free to ask more questions. We don't have a good quick handwritten or typewritten thing on it, but that's basically the goal.
Typewritten. Okay. So we should get a typewritten thing, is what I'm hearing. Which
maybe, I mean, today. You only have, oh, and actually there's a deadline, so you only have till the end of next week. Sorry, I was noticing in the chat that we're having some technical challenges or sleeping time challenges.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Sorry.
Issues elsewhere. It's something's weird going on. But it doesn't look like all the channels are broadcasting, but some people are having access issues. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, so long story short, you have until the show next week, not actually the show next week, because I want to be able to announce it on the show next week, but the night before the show next week. So Tuesday night, midnight-ish Eastern. So that would be whatever it is, 5 hours off. So about 5 a.m. UTC. And then we'll be able to announce the winners at the episode next week, along with Scott McCarty, not Chris McCarty, whoever that might be.
There's a Chris Carty in the Kubernetes community. Maybe that's where you got it all.
Maybe. Yep. Or I just conflated Chris Short and Scott McCarty because I was reading two things at the same time.
That's entirely possible as well.
All right. So, with all that aside, and feel free, as to Chris's point, right, we kind of burned through that, so feel free to ask questions if we didn't say anything that made a lot of sense. Okay, so what I wanted to do today, so originally the plan for the show was to talk about Docker Compose with Podman and the cool store. However, in order to do that, I need to make the cool store run in something not OpenShift, right, in Podman. And so what I thought we'd start with is kind of the differences between those two different environments. And assuming, oh, Meld, you died on me. So let me just open the folders up, because it's going to take me a second, because it's... there's many folders.
There's always folders or directories if you're old school.
Yes, exactly. Which one's original, folder or directory? Actually,
directory came from Unix, folder came from Microsoft.
Oh, okay. I don't know what. Yeah, I kind of go back and forth.
It might have been Apple for the folder. I forget.
That's what I was wondering. Actually, now that you say it, but I hadn't really thought about it. I don't know where I got it from, because I was never a big Mac user. Let's see. Oh, and by the way, if anyone wants to at least partially follow along, the stuff I'm about to show is in the episode's repo on a branch called E30 Initial. Okay. I'll open this and then I can share a link. Oops.
Google Calendar just blows my mind sometimes.
Yeah, the G Suite, I mean, aside from, Google Drive is really nice, but the rest of G Suite is, as far as I'm concerned, not geared to work usage. It's good for personal, But I don't think it handles work stuff very well.
Well, see, here's my thing, right? Like I schedule a lot of stuff on my own calendar and other calendars, right? The public facing calendar and everything else. And it's just like when I add people that are invited, they should not disappear a couple of days later. Right? Like
that seems like you have one job.
On the invite, right? Like that's just leave the invite alone.
Right.
And don't change it for me, right? Like that's all I want.
Right.
Right. Like I'm not asking for a whole lot, I don't think, but yeah.
All right. Sorry, just getting that link for the chat as well. Which,
where's, well, come on.
E30.
So here it is. Asking about video lag on Twitch. I am not seeing any video lag on my monitor over here. Just did my head movements and everything to double check that. JP says, I wish I would disappear from some of my meeting invites. Yeah, no kidding. I feel you on that one. Right, like you could just totally skip it if you wanted.
We give you permission.
Yeah, you're allowed.
Not allowed to blame us or anything, but
you can totally blame it on me.
Oh, all right.
I'm totally cool with that.
All right, so let's see this. Yeah. So if you are unfamiliar with Meld, that is what I'm sharing right now. I think it is a really cool piece of software. It is open source and allows you. I was wondering, I don't know if can I make this any bigger? I don't normally present with Meld, so sorry if it's a little small.
Yeah, I don't know if you. Good question.
I'm just kind of looking for a button that might be make big. But yeah, so I was kind of looking for
nothing. Bottom right, anything? No, nothing.
Oh, here we go. Oh no, that's tab width. Okay. Oh, I can. Oh well, it's 14, so maybe it's readable. I can make it bigger, so let me know if it is not readable. Okay, so what I want to
not readable if it needs to be.
Sorry,
I would say it's not readable.
Oh, it's not. Okay, yeah, I'll make it bigger. Obviously, for me, it's very readable. Let's make this 16.
Try 18.
18 doesn't read like as far as my side. It doesn't matter that much. So here, we'll try this. That doesn't look any different, does it?
No. It looks exactly the same. I'm so glad settings and invites and everything are working today for us.
Well, if we didn't have something go poorly, let's try this.
So I'm trying to see if my mouth is lagging, like BadNet Mess says. That's weird. Mouth lag.
What I'm afraid of is it's going to want me to reload it.
Oh, well, just push forward and be very descriptive. How about that?
All right. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be making any difference, but at least I can feel better about clicking the button. Okay, so what I wanted to show was, okay, so originally CoolStore, as we talked about a few episodes ago, we talked about it in terms of OpenShift. And if we get lucky, maybe I can show you a nice picture. Let me make sure that will be possible in a few minutes. Oh, come on. But suffice to say, kind of the important, are you going to go? The important part is it's made up of a number of different, let me collapse these, a number of different versions. Oh my goodness, I'm so distracted today. All right, so that should be cooking hopefully soon. Okay, so the way this, the architecture of the CoolStore works is it's got two kind of data stores, and one of them is your inventory. So basically like, oh, actually, why don't I share?
Yeah, share the repo.
I was actually going to share, I'll share the app so that you can kind of see what I mean as well. So Oops, wrong window. This one. Okay, so here's the cool store. It's got two different kind of data sources, right? One is what are the things in the store, and then how many of them we have left. Okay, so and then so the inventory is, and then we can actually see, because it's a demo app, right? It's kind of nicely set up so that you can see the individual pieces. So in Quarkus, whoa. Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Inform us what's funny.
Okay, so the way I have it set up is I set up the backend in a Podman pod. So in other words, in like an OpenShift pod or Kubernetes pod. So now the backend is not addressable directly, which is exactly what you want, except when you're trying to display stuff that's in the backend. So let me find my terminal window, and we are going to, okay, so if you see, yeah, I have
thank you,
a whole mess of containers. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kill this, and let's see, what is it? Podman pod rm minus f, and I think it's I can't remember. I think I called it backend or something. Let's just do cat podman launch. Oops. It's called, oops, not that one, the other one. This is the problem.
Yeah, launch pod. Yeah,
there we go. So, okay, so I called it cool store backend intuitively enough. So we're going to say podman pod rm minus f, cool store backend. I feel like I'm missing a flag. Let me just check. No, I got force.
You had force.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. Because I don't want all. That's like different. Yeah. All right, so this is going to make it all not work.
Right. You just broke the cool store. Good job.
Right. Okay, so
mission accomplished.
Yeah, right, exactly. So see, this is, I still feel like I'm, oh no, okay, there we go. And now let's kill. I think actually I can keep that running. So let's Podman cool store. Okay, and so I have hopefully a working shell script which will just launch this, and we'll give that a second, because this is one of the challenges with like Go applications and Node.js applications, is they aren't great at caching because they go and get a lot of their libraries off the internet. So I could fix that by going and hand building all this stuff and putting it all local, which arguably I should if I was going to run this in production. But because for the sake of a demo, what I want to do is keep it up to date more than I want to keep it running in a sense. But it does take a few extra minutes.
Can you blow the font size up on your terminal?
Another one?
Yep. Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, let me know if you can't read that. Who asked? Vladimir. Let me know if you can't read that, buddy.
Okay, so
yes, our good friends from Microsoft.
Yeah, so what I wanted to show off is kind of like you can use a bunch of different languages and various bits to run your application. So I actually picked the more esoteric versions of the parts of the cool store even. So all right, so now it should be running, and it looks like it is, and I'm just not sure if the front end is going to work because I'm not sure if it's pointing at the right IP. But I can look, or sorry, at the right port rather. So this is running on, here's catalog. Where is inventory?
Where did my inventory go? Where did
9081, it's already in use. That's what I was afraid of.
Oh, is it running on the other one? Is that the port?
That's the one the web is running on.
Okay.
So I think, no. All right. Well, let me show you what I was going to show you, and then we can worry about that in a minute because we're going to have to mess with that anyway if we want to talk about the compose stuff. But suffice to say, so if we look at, let's see, catalog is on 80. It looks like, oops, 9080. How did I get there?
You got me.
All right, and so here's the catalog, and you can hit this nice little test hit, which is kind of cool, and because Firefox decides to render JSON nicely. But as you can see, it's the description of the item, and then the inventory carries the amount of them that we have left. So I was going to kind of walk through the individual pieces. So on the left-hand side, we have kind of the OpenShift version of the cool store. And on the right-hand side, we have a slightly hacked, like as in it's not a great version, but I wanted to kind of show the differences of kind of running it in Podman. And what I wanted to kind of in particular point out is that we could make it so that it would run in both. But the original authors of the cool store were looking to run it in OpenShift, so that's how it's focused. So I wanted to kind of, I thought it would be useful to talk about a few of the things that are why it breaks down if you try to run it in Podman. And so, and you might be able to want to run it in both, right? You might want to be able to experiment with things in Podman and then post it to OpenShift as, you know, kind of a way to approach it. So first up, oh, this has got the nice big font. It's just, it must be.
Would you have to do reload it or something?
No, I think it's the file comparison is in the big font, but the file list is not, or maybe that's in a different setting somewhere.
That's weird, but okay.
Okay, so the first and foremost thing that we had to do was be more explicit about where we were getting our base container images from.
Mm-hmm.
So OpenShift provides a whole mess of container images to put your stuff on top of. And so we had to be more explicit about you know, where that was happening. The other thing that I discovered in a kind of like, and I don't think I remember this, but apparently this is true in Docker as well, and this is actually where Podman and Build get it from, is that if you add files as a non-root user to a container, they will be owned by root. Which I don't, that seems so weird. I can't believe it does that, and I can't believe I never noticed that would happen in Docker as well. I don't use a lot of base. I tend not to use a ton of base images that are pre-built. I tend to use bare one and then add the stuff I want. So it could be that. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. But so what I have to do here in this Podman version of it is I have to switch back to the root user so that I can create this, you know, bring the files in for the Go app, and then do the go get, and then I go do the go build. Because if I don't do it as root, I don't have permissions to access some of the files because they were brought in as root. So I think that's kind of annoying, you know, but it is what it is. So that's why I switched to user root. The hard part here is when if you want to switch back from the root user, is knowing what that user is. So you have to go investigate your base container image to find out what user it's creating and what it's using. We tend to, like Red Hat based container images, the user is almost always default DEFAULT. But your mileage may vary. It may be different for different environments. Yes, JP Dade from scratch.
Okay, so this one is from scratch. Okay.
Right. So this is the point.
I could have just looked and said from go blah 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 as builder. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, But what I'm actually doing is what do they call it? Multi-stage build.
Yeah.
I'm like two-phase commit. No, that's not right.
Oh God.
Yeah. So what it's doing, so that's why I don't have to switch users back, because what I'm doing is I'm going in as user root, I'm doing the build or whatever, and then I'm just pulling the UB8 minimal, pulling in the binary from Go that Go generated. And then the other thing, if you notice what I do is I change the port that's exposed here, because one of the differences when I don't have like a service interface like you do in OpenShift is I have to put everything on different ports, right? Because the service handles that for me. But in like Podman, I have to put everything on different ports because they can't all listen on the same port. So those are some of the differences here. There was no particularly good reason that I switched from Alpine to UBI, except that Alpine wasn't working for me. So I'm not sure, maybe that version is a little old or something. And I couldn't be bothered trying to find what the right one was. So I just used UBI 8 minimal, and it works. So I just kind of walked away. Okay, so that was the differences in the Docker file. But the thing that really particularly bothered me is that I had to change the actual code base. So if you look here, I changed the port number here as well. So this is not very what we refer to as dry, right? I don't even remember what it stands for, but it's an acronym for
usability.
It's only like, no, it's like only store the same data once.
Right.
And it comes from Ruby land, and I'm totally blanking out what it stands for. So if somebody in the audience remembers what the acronym expands to, we would love to hear it.
I'll figure it out. Don't worry.
There we go. All right. So that 8090 or 8080 in the old version,
don't
that
repeat
should be
yourself. There you go.
Don't repeat yourself. That's it. So that is both in the Docker file and in this Go code file. So it really should be in some sort of configuration so that you don't have to maintain it in multiple places. And then we can ignore, and so we'll move on to the next component, because I think that's the only differences. Yeah. And so that's our Go application. And exactly, Christian, bad coding. So
you naughty Langdon, you.
I didn't write it. And it's funny because you can tell, at least I think I can tell, different developers wrote the different components because the style is different. Right. So it's kind of funny. But so moving on to our actually, let's move to the inventory just so for the sake of the architecture. And let me see if this thing is back up yet. Just to give you a picture of what we're talking about. So just for the sake of visualization, I wanted to show you this. But in Podman, I'm actually not using MariaDB or Postgres. I'm just using this in-memory database provided by Java called H2. So just kind of ignore those in the picture here. I had them set up in a script, and I just let the script run instead of like trying to clean it up too much. But as you can see, there's this catalog for the cool store. There is, I can't remember how to make this thing go away. And then we have the inventory for the cool store, and then we have a gateway in front of it. And then the web goes to the gateway, which then goes to the catalog, or the inventory. Actually, what it does is one API call here makes two, one to here and one to here, and then it combines the data set into what the web front end is actually looking for. So
that's
just kind of
Rapscallion Reeves. I think I kind of answered it, but I think I kind of know the answer. Do you have to expose a different port in the Docker file, or can you just publish it as a different host port? To which I answered, I think the CLI overrides the file itself in Docker.
Yeah, so the expose, the expose itself is purely like, or to the best of my knowledge,
to expose something, so you have to put
it actually doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to be there at all. It's purely as guidance for the consumer. So I can do exactly. I can give it any arbitrary port. The reason I don't is the guidance for the user problem. Is so yes, I could on the command line change the port, and in fact I do, but basically that's the problem we're talking about, is that it's more the guidance to the user, not so much the actual code that is required to be that way in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so going back here, moving on to the inventory. So one thing that happens with the Java build out is just that this target directory gets created, and all the bits, when it's compiled, when the Java stuff is compiled, it lands in this directory called target. So we're going to ignore that because it's the same, right? Or it's not important to what's happening. We're just, whenever we run that Maven build, it's going to create a target directory with a bunch of combined stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All 90% of the errors I run into are pebkek. So nice. The other thing I want to point out here is the differences between the other thing is another annoying factor, which I probably could fix, but I wasn't sure how to originally, and this is kind of like another one of those examples, is when I run a Quarkus app, I want to also have tests. The thing is, when I'm running the Quarkus app in Podman, I had a chicken and egg problem. Basically, I needed to build it and then build the container image, and then I needed to run the container image before I could run the tests, because there was no other way to run it, because I don't have Java installed, or for the sake of argument, I don't have Java installed on the target build machine. So I removed the tests because there wasn't a real clean way of getting around that problem without pretty serious re-architecture. So, or at least the only ways I knew how to approach that problem. So maybe somebody smarter than me knows a better way, but that was the problem I ran into, and so that's why I removed the tests. Generally a bad idea, but this is a consideration to take into account when you want to make an application that is kind of multi-deployable, right?
Right. And I'm waiting for Christian to call you bad again.
Exactly. All right. So one thing I wanted to point out, actually, let me back up. I'll come to this in a second. So let's talk about the container file. First of all, in the original, in the OpenShift version, there is no container file, because OpenShift has a cool tool called Odo, which will let you create a Quarkus application and a bunch of other platforms, and just say, here's the code, buddy, go make a container out of it. And so if you come over here, you can actually see, if I remember what I'm doing. So this is the Quarkus app, and then let me see how we want to do this. So view logs. In theory, I'm just not sure if it goes back far enough to actually see what I'm looking for. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to be able to see it here. But what's actually happening is it is actually creating a Docker file on the fly, or a container file on the fly, and then putting all the bits into it, and then compiling the Java, and then deploying the Java code. Because it how Java is laid out, and most other languages, but how Java is laid out and how the structure of that deployment environment, it can just automate that whole thing for you. Unfortunately, when we do it on kind of the command line with like Podman, we can't. So we have to go manually create a container file. And one thing I just wanted to leave in here, and I'll call it out, is I was mentioning that we use this H2 in RAM database. So one of the things that Quarkus lets you do, unlike typical Java, is that you can actually compile down to a native application. That's part of, or one of the ways it gets so much speed. But if I compile it to a native application, H2 doesn't work, because H2, for whatever reason, hasn't done enough with their code, or maybe it doesn't make sense, or what, like they may have perfectly good reasons for not doing it, but an H2 server can't be compiled native. It even warned me. It said you can do this with the client, but you can't do it with the server. So that's why it's not compiled native. Instead, I'm using this other Quarkusism, which I think is actually a Javaism now as well, or maybe it was first, but called an Uber jar. So if you do any Java, and for me, it's been a really long time, but I know it pretty well. Normally when you launch an application, you have to provide what's called the entire class path, which gives some huge advantages because it means that you can, for your application, declare all the libraries you want to use. The downside is you have to declare all the libraries you want to use. So typically people do that with jars to try to wrap up some of those dependencies so that it makes, so it takes up like less, so you have less command line essentially. But then you can kind of go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and make what they call an Uber jar, an Uber being from the German, for super, which basically says, shove everything into this one jar so that I only have one file I need to like bounce around to wherever to make it go.
Nice. Okay.
So that's what's going on here. And then, so I just create, I mean, it's a pretty basic container file. And then, so that's kind of it there. But I do want to talk about runit.sh. And the reason I want to talk about it is because what one would expect me to have done is to have put this directly in the container file, right, as an entry point or command.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm not, which I finally figured out, is because this container is actually based on a software collection. So a software collection, you're learning everything there is to know about RHEL and deployment and everything else today.
Yeah, no kidding.
You see why I wasn't sure if we'd even get to compose. But in a software collection, the code is not installed in the same directory as it is normally. So one of the things that sysadmins in particular really like about Linux is that all the Linuxes, at least within their own distro, follow very strict rules about where files land on the system. And my running joke with an old friend of mine who's a sysadmin is like, somewhat because at 3 a.m. when you need to replace OpenSSL, you want to very blindly be able to type, move OpenSSL to new directory and know with your fingers where that goes without actually having to be fully awake. So that consistency has the problem of what if you want to have multiple versions of things? Okay, so two languages in particular do a good job of solving that problem in the language itself. One is Python and one is Java. However, a few years ago, like 10 now, no, not 10, let's say 7, 8.
7, okay.
I'm trying to remember because it's slightly less than I've been at Red Hat, so I have to do it so I can do the math that way. But there was this concept introduced called a software collection, which through some magic trickery allowed you to have multiple versions of something, not Java, not Python, installed on the same system, and then use it or choose it by application. So it's super nice and advantageous and is actually superseded now by AppStream. So this is kind of the same goal as AppStreams, but with a less invasive approach.
Okay.
The problem is, in order to use a software collection, you have to enable it first. So what I wasn't doing when I was just calling this command directly in the entry point is bash rc never runs. So bash rc is what is actually doing the enablement of the software collection, which is then in turn setting up Java to actually be able to execute this command. So long story short, in the container file, I could go try to set up the software collection, basically through a few different like double and commands. Or I can shove it off into a shell script and then actually call the shell script, which has the bash commands are being run first, then this shell script, then off you go. So that was a long story. As I explained to Chris before the show, this had some interesting challenges in trying to make this work with Podman. But I think, like I said, hopefully y'all are finding this a good learning exercise of like, these are the kinds of differences in the real world that you might see between you know, an OpenShift deployment and you know, and like a Podman deployment, and how you could probably get around having to have so many differences. Okay, so the last thing that I ran into is Maven and Java builds in general generate a lot of content
Yes.
that you don't want.
Yes.
So, and then kind of a related problem is Docker, when you do a Docker build, it actually tarballs the entire subdirectory or tree under where you are before the build starts. So,
okay.
If that is 20 gigs of content,
which
that can
could
take
very
a while.
easily be the case, yeah.
Right. So it does not tarball only the things that you say add or copy. It does everything. This is actually a big difference. And one of the things I really like about Podman and Builda over Docker. So everyone always focuses on running, you know, the whatever we call it, the difference of being Podman lets you do rootless as well as not having a daemon running. But one of the things I really like is that I don't have to go through this kind of machination to not have monster build times when I have a really large, you know, like website or something like that. So this Docker ignore file conveniently has this star right at the beginning, and then it says not on these few directories, right? So I spent a whole bunch of time and also looked like an idiot on the internet asking questions, not able to figure out why I could not get this runit.sh to show up in my container. Turns out because this is the original and star covers runit pretty well. So I had to explicitly call out that I want to include this now. So if you're ever seeing, I should have showed, yeah, so for future reference, let's just look at this real quick. Dot, and let's say, and then actually less, yeah, build minus I, no, minus T, temp, and just dot.
Right.
So if you're ever seeing this error right here, talk about driving me crazy, because I'm like, okay, maybe I typed the path wrong, you know, something stupid or whatever. You know, I've run into problems with having symlink directories around and things like that. So I check this path, the path looks good, blah, 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 you know, and then I'm like, you literally are telling me it's there, but you decided not to use it. So it took me a really long time to figure out that that's because I told Podman not to use it, right? To filter it out. So if you ever see that error, that should be handy for you, because then maybe hopefully you won't run into this problem, and you will not look like an idiot on the internet when you ask people why it doesn't work. All right, so moving on. Where did my, there we go. Let me just close all these. Okay, so that was the inventory. And then lastly, we have our gateway here. And excuse me. One of the things that actually, let me start here. Yeah, okay, I did take this out. I thought I deleted it. Okay, so one thing that was both, you know, expected but also annoying was just that the original author of this Docker file relied on defaults to get to the URL or to the port numbers that it was looking for. So by default, if you don't set this environment variable, it will use 8080. again, going back to that, I want to run it on different ports. Actually, to whoever's earlier question, the reason I do need to specify different ports in here, and not in the Docker file, but in different ports, is because to run it in a pod, that pod is all one network namespace. As all one network namespace, I cannot change what port it's running on. And what I wanted to do is, at least, even if I didn't have the exact same files between OpenShift and Podman, I could have the exact same files between running 4 containers and running one pod with 3 containers and then another container. So if I want to run all those things in one pod, they all have to be on different ports. That was the genesis of that. I had forgotten. Okay, so long story short, there is a environment variable you can set in .NET that will let you change what port it listens on, and it's called ASP.NET core _ URLs, and it will go and use that other port. Yes. Did you have another comment?
No, I just said nice. Yeah.
So ignore the fact that program.cs is different. That's a mistake on my part. I commented out the line and forgot to delete it. So what I thought was particularly funny about this is that the least problematic of these pretty much was the .NET one.
Of course.
Yeah, which I just kind of thought was amusing. And then finally we get to the Node.js app. So the Node.js one, let's start with the container file, had the initial same problem as, what was it, Quarkus, which is that there is no container file in the original, because Node.js is like a near and dear to OpenShift's heart platform. So I had to go and get a container. Excuse me for a sec. So I had to go and get a container or a base image that I could use for this. I ran into the same problems of which user am I, and then kind of switching back and forth. In this one, I'm not using the multi-stage build, so I have to switch back to user default. Once I do, basically, I just do a chown to make the ownership right. Because in Node.js, unlike in Go, for example, everything's not compiled in. So I have to go and also change the ownership of all the libraries to make sure that it can access them. But if you notice, even though I'm root, I'm not doing a global npm install. I'm doing a local one, so that everything will be under whatever it is, .npm, but it's all in the same directory as the code base, so that it'll just work. So moving on from that, but then I run into the same problem again as with the software collection, because Node.js is actually delivering as a software collection, which then I need to use my fancy run it to be able to do the SCL enable and then in the npm start. And this, obviously, if you're familiar with Node.js, there's like 87 different versions of this command. I just chose this one because I like it, but Node dot would also work. So
yeah,
mileage may vary.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the run it there. The thing that got, I thought, a little annoying here was, let's see if I can show this. So this one was another kind of dry problem. Can I see, how do I
would just like to ask you to time check yourself.
Yes, I was just noticing that as well. I'm almost done though. So
yeah, I get it.
Let's see. Let me open this differently. Oops. Oh my goodness. What was it? / original, and then okay, what I wanted to point out here is there's a configuration here that it's using to get the basically where that gateway service is being hosted.
Mhm.
But then it does some cheating because this is all client side. So it's actually using the JavaScript location.host to find out what the server is, and then it's inserting the generated by OpenShift service name. So if you look here, so if you go to this, and if I click on it correctly, so what it's doing is it's doing, oops, wrong window. It's doing location host replace here, right?
Mhm.
So it's grabbing this, and because that's location.host, right? And then it's injecting the name of the service, so the gateway service, in front of it, and then it's adding API products to the end of it to get to the API. And the API, if you see here, is here. And if you do the test it here, so this is actually running in Vertex, but whatever, it's the same code. I mean, it's the same result. So if you notice this URL, right? So it's the, location.host with gateway and stuff injected at the front, and then API product. So speaking of not dry, I was not thrilled with that. So, but this is the kind of thing you have to go and dig through. Is that now with a locally running set of containers, you don't get any of these advantages of generated routes, generated services, or whatever that give you pointers at things. All you get basically is a port and an IP address. Like a port and an IP address. So if you look at, if you can get out of VI, so if we, what was it? And then we look at the web Node.js, and then we do essentially the same file. I had to change it to hack in, basically I tried to go kind of as trivially as possible, but I created the API endpoint and I changed it to be something I pass in on the environment variable command line. So if I look at this, I have to pass in, right, an IP address. Mind you, because I'm on Fedora, and I think most of the Linuxes now, I have to go and hack out and figure out what my IP address is, right? Because there's no nice ETH0 anymore.
Yeah.
So I have to figure out what my IP address is. I have to know what port it's going to be on, and then I have to supply that into the container. So that's a huge pain in the neck. But suffice to say, I make this choice here or make this fix here by basically using the environment variable that I'm now passing in on my launch command. So I don't know. Hopefully this was interesting. I thought it was really interesting because I don't know that I've ever really, I don't know that I've ever gone from OpenShift to Podman. But I think on the show, we've done Podman to OpenShift. So I thought it was an interesting set of differences. That was it, I think.
Cool.
Let me just find the right. Oh,
you can do it. I believe.
Can do it. Okay, so and then I created a couple of shell scripts to launch it just to make my life a little easier. Those aren't super interesting. Yeah, we have two different versions, but but they just kind of launch the container. I thought about using like even a function in there to try to clean that up. But let's talk about points real quick before we are officially out of time.
Yes.
And then we can figure out if we want to move on to compose, or like I said, I wasn't sure how long this is going to take. I thought it was a useful exercise, but we can always cover compose soon instead.
Yeah, let's do points and see what we got.
Alrighty. Now I just have to find that window. All right, so here are the points for this time. So we have Narendev up at 4,800 and Netherlands Hackham at 4,700. Both Noah Friction and Joe Fuzz have had no movement in a couple of weeks, so I'm a little afraid. Where have they been? Are they on vacation? And if they're on vacation, why wouldn't they be watching the show? So But we Detective Conan Kudo steadily moving upward. Bacon Fork also steadily moving upward. And there's the codes for this episode. And if I can find the correct window, I can paste them into the chat.
Rapscallion Reeves has never seen sweet internet points, apparently.
Oh, well, so sweet internet points are awesome sauce. But I'm not biased or anything.
No.
Oh, here it is. Let me just throw this in. Okay, so yeah, usually I intro them more, don't I? So as part of the show and part of the kind of level up or whatever, we try to give out points for people doing stuff so that we can have a little fun with watching the show or submitting issues on the repo or for let's see what else we have, joining our Discord and a bunch of different activities. So if you go actually to the activities page, which not sure which branch I'm on, but so the activities, which I will throw in the chat as well. So we give out points, and then every episode we talk about who's in the lead and how they're doing, and there's also what I refer to as risers. I don't know if there's a different, better term for that, but basically, if you watch a certain number of episodes, you get a big bump in points. And so, but you don't always know where that is. If you do certain kinds of activities, you get more points and less points. So if you go and enter that form, then you will get you'll get your initial points. And one of the things I wanted to call out for this episode, normally we do the leaderboard, and then we sometimes will do like newcomers, so people who've just gotten new points. But what I wanted to point out, even though my tab broke and now I'm annoyed, is we have a couple of up and comers. We have some people who are now in the 500, 400 point range. M. Roche, and what did we decide? That was Miklo. And Miklo and M. Roche, I think, were both featured in prior episodes as new people to the show. M. Para, I can't remember if they were.
I thought it was Imparam. I thought it was M at the end of that username.
Oh, I could have done bad copy paste. So if there is,
that's entirely
my
possible.
apologies.
Yeah.
So, but long story short, I'm really glad to see that somebody we featured as newcomers, are still with the show and are steadily collecting more points. So Rapscallion, we look forward to you collecting your points for the next episode. And right now they only have intrinsic value. Our goal for now, our goal is to have them have extrinsic value, and we are assured that it will be any day now. We are mostly just waiting for T's and C's, but then we will also be able to give out maybe some whatever you call it, access to the Red Hat Cool Store for some swag around the show, etc. So we really look forward to you participating. So we didn't cover what we were supposed to today. I thought it was a really valuable exercise. So I'm sorry if people were just coming here for Compose. But I will reschedule Compose and we will do it in a future episode, I promise. Unfortunately, it won't be for a few weeks because, as I said before, we already have a scheduled guest talking about UBI, Scott McCarty, next week. Then we have Chris Wright and Kelsey Hightower talking about the future of Kubernetes and Summit and Kubecon the week after that. Bad Net Mask, I'm sorry, but you should just watch it during your meeting. Just wait for the boring parts.
Pull it up and put it on the projector.
Right. Just have everybody watch it during
the meeting. The whole team watch it.
And we will happily entertain. If you want, we can have more. We can have just a set of slides that just continuously run on the side to make it feel like it's a meeting with boring slides. So Narendev was expecting some live debugging. I didn't quite get that far. That's what I was going to do with the Compose part. But it does, like I said, I posted it in the Git repo, this part of it, and I want to get to the next part of it, and we will be doing live debugging for that definitely, with the trying to make this work in Compose. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. I don't know, Chris. How do you feel? What do you think we should?
I mean, I say, can you do Compose in 10 minutes? Probably not.
Maybe, but I doubt it.
Okay, so let's not do it right now. Yeah.
But what I will point out, let me do one quick thing if you are
Okay.
interested in Compose, which, so I did not, oh, I forgot I made a nice little directory over here. So this is not in the repo because I'll literally show you this Vagrant file. So didn't seem valuable. But what I wanted to show was if you do, and I need to fix this one of these days, but yeah. All right. So if you do, let me just, oh, I can just do it this way. So all I did to get Docker Compose was DNF install Podman. And then because I wanted to ensure the weak dependencies would come out correctly. So one of the newer things about RPM is that you now have more sophisticated dependency relationships than just it depends on this. Excuse me. So in other words, although I guess this has kind of been around for a while, but Docker Compose is going to look for a container engine when it tries to install. In order to ensure that the container engine it looks for is Podman without knowing the ins and outs of how that RPM works, I installed Podman, and then as a separate operation, I installed Docker Compose. And if I had been smarter, I would have shown basically the RPM install. Podman the wrapper, yes.
No, but I want to point out to people, the person that's doing data on Kubernetes is actually a very talented wrapper, like on the side. So yeah, when they do shows like this, they come up with a wrap afterwards to market them. I think it's pretty genius. And
Who is this?
This is Bart Farrell. I don't know how to say his last name, but
that's hilarious.
Yeah, so like he's been around the Kubernetes sphere. He just became an ambassador yesterday, so it's pretty cool to like welcome him into the community and everything of ambassadors. But he's been doing stuff on the outside, and it's been Bart Farrell. Yeah,
he should just put in quotes in his middle name as Podman,
right?
Like as his nickname. Speaking of rap battles, yesterday I came across, if you don't mind some questionable language, Biggie Smalls doing a rap battle on the street in Brooklyn when he was 17.
Yeah.
No, oh my God.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It was amazing. Yeah.
So, okay. But long story short, so I installed Docker Compose, but what I want to point out is I don't have Moby. I don't have Docker. So it is using Podman, like that fulfilled the requirement for Docker Compose. So that was kind of like what I wanted to point out. And I was kind of playing around with this might just work because it might. So we could just see. It's up, right? Or is it start?
Dude, I don't know. I try to stay away from things that start with the word Docker. That's a personal preference.
I bet I could do minus F. Thought it was. Let me just rename it. Move compose to Docker compose.yaml. So I used to use Docker Compose back in the day, like, a while back, all the time. But it's been a while. So that looks promising.
Okay. So yeah, you're 5 minutes into your 10.
Right. But at least we're satisfying Narendev.
Yes.
Let me just make sure I can actually see the internet.
In this box, yeah. Okay.
Yep. So that's not the problem.
API version.
So yeah,
File not found, no such file directory.
The thing that I was a little confused about when I was looking into this the other day was, or yesterday or whatever, was one of the banes of my existence, or anybody else who's used Docker on at least Fedora and RHEL and kind of its derivatives, is that there's a socket, which, because it's Linux, right, is a file called docker.sock that is owned incorrectly if so backing up a little bit. So Docker, when you run it, is always running as root. You don't feel like it's running as a root, because normally when it tells you how to set it up, it says, okay, put yourself in the Docker group. The Docker group has the ability to run containers using the Docker daemon, which is in fact running as root. The thing is that if you're in the Docker group, the ownership on var run docker sock, which is where the socket lives that Docker uses for its API communication, is owned by the wrong user. Actually, it's owned by the wrong group. So it's root:root rather than root:docker. So as a result, if you put yourself in the Docker group, it doesn't work. So the only way to do it is to run Docker as like with sudo, which I don't like doing, partially because I didn't realize when I first started using Docker that it was always running as root anyway. But now it's kind of like habit. But so what you had to do was, if you chown the Docker sock to be owned by root:docker, and then you're in the Docker group, it works. So what I'm a little confused about is Podman, as far as I can tell, is not putting a docker.sock in the directory. And I would assume that Docker Compose is accessing it through that. And this is why I wonder if that's why we're getting this error here. Because it's a no such file, right? So I suspect that this is the biggest hurdle, is figuring out how to make Compose realize that it's using Podman in a sense. So that's the first debugging point. My suspicion is that once we get over that hurdle, everything will just work. It's just this kind of, and this is a dumb setup thing, not a important thing in a sense. So I was hoping, or what I was expecting, is that we could either figure that out during the show today, or we'll figure it out when we reschedule to do Docker Compose with Podman for some future show.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I'm assuming there's no more questions from the audience, because things have gone into food talk. So yeah. So yeah.
There is a question about an OPA t-shirt. I am not wearing an OPA t-shirt. I'm wearing a RHEL 8 t-shirt.
I'm shouting out to OPA today because
nice.
The pod security policy deprecation blog post went live yesterday. So just reminding folks that PSPs are going away. Go to the Kubernetes blog to find out. But yeah, the concerns that I had are about like folks that are starting to use PSPs right now are addressed in that article, right? Like, stay close to the core set of PSPs and try not to deviate with too much wildness, and you'll be okay in the future as the community develops a new solution for PSP. And there's also many alternatives as well, including OPA.
Is it worth expanding what PSP is?
Pod security policy. A pod security policy will basically say this software can only do this, and this is connect to a database, connect to an outside resource, some S3 bucket, whatever, talk to other stuff inside the cluster. But basically, it's to prevent people from designing bad software, because when bad software breaks, it breaks in unexpected ways.
So it's targeted at me? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's and essentially, right, like, think of it as, oh, somebody's gotten into this container somehow, but they can't break out because the policy for the container is set in such a way that it kind of isolates it to just what they allow that pod or namespace to see, right?
So the SE Linux for Kubernetes.
Yeah, that basically badnet mask is right here, right? Like SC Linux for pods, essentially. Yeah. I mean,
Oh yeah, there you go. Look,
lack
he
of a
said
better
it
term.
before I did, or they.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So Podman does not require socket for communication because it works on fork exec model ? Like Podman binary.
Well, that's what I wonder. So
container child process. Yeah.
What Podman v3? Yeah, so it does do a fork exec, but Podman v3, one of the things that it does. So the way Docker Compose and a lot of other things that wrapped up around the Docker ecosystem work is that there's a REST API that Docker exposes, the Docker daemon exposes, that is then called by, I don't know if the actual Docker client uses it or not, but all these other things like Docker Compose, for example, right? Because Docker Compose wasn't originally developed by Docker. It was developed by a third party who I can't remember the name of, but I think it was a guy who just built it for fun. And so it calls the REST API. Podman v3, its big bring to the table is support for that Docker REST API in the vast majority. Apparently, there are a few things in the API that it does not support because it's kind of antithetical to how Podman works. Oh, I wonder if that's what it is. Because when Brent was on the show the other day, he said that Docker Compose requires root.
Yes.
So I wonder if it's just I need to sudo
do it as root. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
So I stopped sharing, but I got the exact same error.
Okay.
But I threw sudo in front of it. Oh well. Okay, so there's something, like I said, there's some setup-y thing that's dumb that I'm not doing correctly. And I would rather not debug that on the show because it's boring as far as I'm concerned. I'd rather just tell you how to set it up, and then we can go and have a grand old time. Sorry, I was reading the comments. And then we can have a grand old time actually debugging, getting the cool store working in Compose. And that I think would be a lot more interesting episode. So cool. That's where I'm kind of at. And I think we should kind of wrap it up today, and we'll revisit it in a future episode.
Yeah, so coming up next on the channel, folks, it's the one and only Andrew Sullivan and myself, and we have a special guest today. We'll be going over the various OpenShift installation methods. You know, we kind of went through them all last year, but there's more. But wait, there's more. So stick around for that. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC. And then
and it's getting progressively easier.
Right.
Which
that's
is really the part that I care about.
And then OpenShift Commons briefing, we'll have GitLab on today, talking about DevOps. So that's going to be a good one. And then wrapping up today at an odd time because the guest has a meeting prior, 2:15 today Eastern. We will do Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. We're going to be talking about application streams. So that's kind of, you know, tying into what we're talking about sometimes on this show. So yeah, it's going to be a great day for the channel, and stick around. Appreciate y'all.
Cool. Yeah, I like app streams a lot. In case you're interested, that's I think 1915 UTC. So
yeah, 1815.
1815. I can't remember. Have we done the time zone switch?
They did the EST last week, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're 4 hours off instead of 5.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I don't know. I may try to be around for the RHEL show. I know I have a prior meeting as well. But we hopefully I'll be able to make it.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for tuning in, and don't be a stranger. Also, before I forget, Red Hat Summit is coming. And if you haven't heard, Red Hat Summit is going to be a 3-part event and very little cost.
Like this much.
Like this much. Yes.
Yeah.
Like
3 weeks, give or take.
Yeah. Yeah, a little 3 weeks-ish. Yeah. The last week of the month, right? But yeah, so definitely look into that. Sign up, get your team to sign up, whatever they need to do. Check it out and see what you can learn. Without any further ado, I will sign off for the day. Thank you all for watching.
Well, for the moment. You'll be back.
For the moment, not for the day, for the illustrious one.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe out there.